We're recording.
Call to order. I call order to the workshop for Bullhead City Elementary School Board on Wednesday, January 15th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. Secretary, please take roll.
Diane Beardsley,
Present.
Jeannie Borland,
Present.
Brandy Dubois,
Present.
Doug Lutz,
Here.
Corey Burgess.
Okay, sorry. We are moving on to, yes, thank you. 1.3, the calendar for year 2021. So that is in front of us, and we have proposed to.
So, Madam President, I gave to you a copy, to all of you, a copy of the one that was presented to the high school board for CRUSH, and one, that would be the other one, and then one that I prepared for you. The major differences are that since the CRUSH proposal, and now I understand has been adopted, school year ends a week before Memorial Day, and therefore starts a week earlier in the fall, or in the summer. I just moved it a week, so that it moved the whole calendar a week, left everything else the same, but just started a week later, and ended a week later. And then the only other change that I proposed was in February, they have parent conferences and in the same week as President's Day. And it occurred to our team of folks that that really means that the 16th would really be the only full total regular school day of that week. Would only be one. And that the other two, the 17th and 18th, would kind of be partial days, you know, certainly not regular schedules. So on the calendar that I gave to you, I just moved those 2 days to the next week. It's totally up to you, you know, whatever questions you have, I'll try to answer, and comments, you know, anything you want to discuss.
Well,
It's open for you.
Marg.
I think he's done.
I'm having trouble hearing.
I mean, even without it being President's Day, I like the option of not having conferences at the same time as the high school.
Oh, okay.
Because I have conferences in 2 locations.
Doug, this is
and that
Lance.
makes
I'm
it
going to try to
easier.
move the phone closer to the board, okay?
It does make it hard, and then even the ones that
Yes.
have to rush from elementary to junior high in middle schools, they were, we gotta go, and we gotta get that junior high, so.
Especially if you have kids at preschools. I mean, there's a lot of families that are trying to get from.
Yeah, if we can speak up, I know we can project our voices, that way Doug can hear us. Okay, yeah. Doug, this is just a workshop, so we're gonna try to speak loud so you can hear us, but once we start the meeting, you'll be able to hear us even better.
So pretend.
Thank you.
Yeah. So.
So they're starting on the 29th, and we're projected, this is of July, they're starting, okay,
Well, their calendar
Teachers go back.
has teachers
Oh.
starting on the 20th, the new teachers, and their first day of school actually is July 29th. I shifted everything a week and then also added one more day, a Friday for our new teachers. We found that that works, and we really need 3 days for new teachers. And then having school actually start on August 5th. So, you know, that was just simply an idea that I ended up shifting things a little bit later, and it's not in school so many copies.
I get that's a good point, however, I know the Boys and Girls Club is closed the week. Are they open that week, so in case these high school kids that help care for their younger siblings?
I don't know.
Because that's gonna be a huge impact on enrollment. If the high school kids, I know that my son helped me with my children when I wasn't working or
Right.
working at the school, vice versa. And if we have these elementary age students, we're gonna have to make sure there's something that they can do, but not all of them are gonna go to the Boys and Girls Club either.
Right. And those are all good points.
Just kind of getting that out there and then that'll reverse when, well, they'll still be out of school ahead of us, so that'll be fine. Oh, should we?
We did, both, Todd sent, we sent both of these to, the other two the other two superintendents, because we really, in terms of calendar, we have to think in terms of 4 school districts, not just 2. Because our calendars, of course, affect Mojave Valley and Tohock. And they try to adjust theirs to ours, but we wanted at least not to blindside them, so we sent them copies. And they have to match theirs, the 2 of them have to match because Tohock now sends its 7th and 8th graders to Mojave Valley Junior High. So, you know, for them, the critical thing is those 2 districts matching. But of course, there are older siblings for their kids too. So anyway, my point is we sent them both to those superintendents. Both of these calendars were acceptable to them. So, you know, so whatever you all end up deciding during the meeting, we'll go with.
Doug, can you hear?
And we can check into the Boys and Girls Club, right? And
Yes.
find out, I mean, we don't have to vote on this tonight.
Yeah, I'd prefer not to vote on it yet. I would just like in the future to maybe have, you know, a meeting with the high school board when they are thinking about their calendar rather than they do theirs and then we do ours. Because I remember when I first moved here and the high school calendar was different than the elementary calendar and was very difficult as a parent. So I think it's more of a cohesive thing that should be done rather than 2 separate, us trying to catch up to them now.
Okay. And I had truthfully hoped that we could run this by, since I've resumed Meet and Confer, as kind of a, you know, a group, even though their conversations are limited by law to salaries, working conditions, and one other thing that right at the moment has escaped me, but it strikes me that this has to do with working conditions.
I would agree.
And, you know, and I would have preferred that we had a little more time for them to have some discussion about it, some
Right.
input, some, you know, expressing concerns, those kinds of things. So, you know, I understand that completely.
Right, and I know it's probably not possible this year since the high school already adopted their calendar, but I know in the past the teachers, when we were asked if we wanted to keep our fall break in October in the past 4 years ago, that the teachers were for that and somehow it was taken away and was very upsetting. So maybe the following year we can work on maybe putting the fall break back into October, and so teachers can have an actual break rather than just the week of Thanksgiving, the ending of that week.
And that would have been the kind of thing that probably would come up in Meet and Confer.
Right.
You know, the certified people could bring that forward if they wanted to.
Right.
And if you decide in the meeting, because it is on your agenda, if you decide in your meeting to table it for now, then I have an opportunity to bring it to the Meet and Confer group, because I'm meeting with the certified folks at the end of the month and the classified folks a week later. So we would in fact have some time to have some input from our employees.
I think that's the way it should be.
Yep, I agree. And it looks that this one is off the whole week of Thanksgiving, is that what we?
Yes,
That's
both
what
of
it
them
was
are.
this year.
Okay.
And it
Whole
was
week of
this year.
Thanksgiving.
Okay. But you want a fall break like in October and then have just the Thanksgiving day and day
Yeah,
after off?
right.
And I will tell you that Mr. Crowe, Whitney Crowe, indicated that because they do the 2 weeks of fall break, they have, because of this change, they have adjusted their fall break to not be 2 consecutive weeks. They have a week in October and then they have the week at Thanksgiving to match our calendar. His folks would prefer to have 2 weeks in October, so that one of those overlaps with our week. So that's just information for you to know that, you know, we really are talking about how this affects the bigger community.
I've also heard rumors from quite a few different people that the board was directing for a 5-day calendar week. Was that a discussion? I haven't heard it, so I didn't know.
The high school board? I don't know. I
I
wasn't at the
heard
meeting.
Our board
was directing for a 5-day school week, so I just
No.
wanted to ask about that.
I mean, it was one of the things that at some point, you know, that's the kind of thing that you don't start in January. That's not the kind of discussion you start in January for the following year. You know, if anybody is interested in reconsidering the 5-day week, we should start talking now for not next year, but the year after. So we have lots of input from people and lots of decisions. Somebody may have heard me say, yeah, maybe that's on the table, I don't know. You know, it was just a speculation and it was just a comment. So if they heard me say it, it certainly wasn't anything about, you know, we're gonna talk about it, because it's too late to talk about it for next year. Regardless of what the high school has done. That's the kind of thing you all need to have some real lead time and have lots of input from and parents and, you know, all kinds of people.
It just seems there was a rumor going around that the board was wanting to go to a 5-day
Yeah, I just
school
wanted
week
to-
when, I don't think that's been brought up by
Yeah,
any of us.
no.
We're
So-
confused as to, we didn't
And
hear
if you
anything
hear
about
those,
it,
if you hear
so-
those rumors, call me, you know, because we don't, you know. Sometimes I refer to rumor with a capital R, like it's a real person out there.
Right,
and
yeah.
Rumor is seldom accurate, so.
So I guess we should take time with this. I mean, we can have more discussion on it, but I don't know that we want to make an actual vote then tonight, right? We're gonna get more input. I think we
I
should
think
get
we need,
some.
I think we need more input.
I mean, are we gonna think about maybe a,
I mean, I'm not opposed to it, and I don't see why we can't go all the way through May. I mean, but at the same time, you do have to consider if there are older students taking care of younger ones, it does make it
Exactly.
difficult if the schedule's not the same.
and a lot of them take that Memorial Day and they take that extra time and then that's where we have a lot of excessive absence at the end, right?
Well, they still would
We
have
don't
Friday,
usually
Saturday,
now that
Sunday,
we
Monday.
end. We used to when we ended
Oh, that's
after
right,
Memorial
that's right,
Day.
right.
It would still be before Memorial Day. Memorial
Right.
Day is just later, is why.
This is the year that the whole calendar shifts. And so if you, I think what Crush did was just take this year's calendar and move it the one day that the calendar moves. But what happens is that one day on the end adds another whole week in May. And that happens every 5 or 6 years, that the calendar, you know, that the days shift. I will tell you that one of the things that will be a factor is that if we were to go with the calendar that I proposed, it does create an issue of a missing payday for returning employees, and we would need to address that. So, you know, I want you all to be aware up front, because we cannot pay employees on a new contract before they actually work at least one day. And so that shifting of that week would make that fall in a bad time. So whatever decision, I would be hopeful that you would decide in February, so employees, if you were deciding to go that way, that employees would have plenty of time to plan for a missing payday. They'd get it on the other end, they're still going to get paid the same number of weeks per year, but there would be that one missing.
A little bit longer gap before the first
A
pay.
lot, yes. And to me, that's one of the things that Meet and Confer folks need to have some say in. You know, that's not just a spur of the moment decision to me that we do that. I remember when it happened, about the second or third year I was in the district. And like everybody else, I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I will tell you it was a big stress, and I didn't know it was coming. So, we don't want to do that to anybody. I don't want anybody to be in that position. So.
Any other comments or questions on the workshop?
I noticed there was a conflict on one of the Flex Fridays in February between the high school.
Well, that's because when I moved those conference days,
Oh, okay.
then I moved the Friday, off Friday to be right after the
I
conferences.
missed that because I was late, okay.
Yeah, so, well, we hadn't talked about it, so
Oh,
it's a
okay.
good question,
All right.
Sandra. I did that because it made sense to have an off Friday after the conferences
Okay.
for teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And then that meant flipping that
Okay.
Flex Friday.
Okay.
So that's this one, the red, okay?
Good point. Anybody else? All right. So, we're moving on to curriculum and instruction.
So Kim, would you put me up, please? Okay. Mrs. Locke prepared the data and this presentation and would have presented it tonight to you, but she's off at a required state meeting representing our curriculum folks. You have a PowerPoint, and so we'll go through that. So, First page after the title. This is our AZ merit data from 2018-19. We began the school year with this testing data. This was all the data that we had to start the year with. And nothing there other than algebra to cheer about. Could be worse, but certainly could be better. And we keep in mind that it is the state test, and it changes fairly often. They've been saying that it'll be changing. One week they say it's changing dramatically for 2020, and the next time they say, no, it's going to be basically the same, just a new vendor. So we will let you know how that goes as we approach testing. If you go to the next page with the pie chart, this gives you the Reader's Digest version of how the school letter grades are determined from those test data that you just looked at. I'm really giving you the Reader's Digest version. When you look at the documents that come to us, there are all these little pieces that get added in, and something has this weight and something has that weight. So this is as close to understandable as we can give you. So the school letter grades are determined using a formula using the data that you just looked at. Schools can also earn bonus points for proficiency of special ed students, as well as the science assessment results. And when we get to those, you're going to see that those save us a lot. Okay, so the blue section on there, 30% of the grade for each school is determined by how many students are proficient plus how many students stayed proficient from year to year. Okay? And proficiency includes proficient and highly proficient. So always keep in mind that it's both of those categories added together. The red, the 50%, is 50% of the score, or the grade is determined by how many students made growth from one year to the next. And of course, the target is at least 1 year's growth for any student. The green, the 10%, is totally the Azella test, which is given to second language students. And it is based on how many improved and how many changed categories. So both on their growth and their change of categories. And then the last 10% is everything else. So it includes the acceleration readiness, which is the number of third graders minimally proficient in English language arts. Plus, it factors in chronic absenteeism, it factors in subgroup improvement, it factors in special ed inclusion, and it factors in students in grades 5 through 8 who pass a high school end of course assessment. For us, that's the students who are in algebra. Okay. So that's the short version of how the letter grades are determined. On the next page, you see the letter grades for our school district for this fall. They came out, were released to us as district administrators on November 1st. And then we had a few days, 2 weeks or so, to file an appeal for any of these. On November 1st, we were also supposed to have received notification of any school that had a D grade for 3 years in a row. And the regulations of the State Department are that if you have a D grade for 3 years in a row, it becomes an F. We did not receive that notification. I did file appeals with the ADE, and then subsequently they recommended to the State Board of Education. I filed the appeals for Sunrise, Bullhead Middle School, and Fox Creek. And I used as our information the fact that we had reconfigured, that Sunrise and Fox Creek both had significant changes in student population as a result of the reconfiguration, and that Bullhead City Middle School was 100% different students than had been there the 2 years previous. Had I known about the 3 E's equaling an F, I would have included that in the appeal. And we only found that out, hi Corey. We only found that out kind of accidentally when Jen was talking with Jennifer Zorger, who is our contact person, the person who's going to be working with our 3 schools on school improvement. And she was stunned that we had not received any information, number one. And then when she learned kind of what had happened in our district, she was even more upset that our appeals were not granted. And so there's nothing she can do about it, but what it did do is that any of our conversations with her, not that they were bad to begin with, but they have been exceptionally pleasant and exceptionally helpful and those kinds of things. So we have a really good relationship with our State Department person who's going to be working with us. We will, in fact, the letters went out to literally every school household in our district because we have middle school and Fox Creek kids that are district-wide. So every family of students in our schools, in Bullhead City Elementary, who attend those 3 schools got a letter. The meetings are set up for this month to meet with the parents, to talk about the specific situations of each school. And all 3 schools are already working on their improvement plans, and they will be able to discuss some of that with the parents at those meetings. So, and Mrs. Lott and I will both be at those meetings to answer questions. Okay, so we want to keep in mind, last year was the first year of a new configuration. The good news about that is it gave us a new baseline of data. And so as we proceed, then we'll be able to see what happens, because it does take 3 to 5 years to see growth and change. The other part that we want to remind everybody is that many of our classrooms, not all, but many of the classrooms last year had begun using Engage New York, which was a new language arts program. And then we had several classrooms at each grade level starting Eureka Math, and in both cases with minimal training. Both of those programs, plus another program that I'll talk about in a few minutes, are in full-blown this year, and lots of training. And you're all educators, and you know that training is critical in terms of being successful in introducing something new. Any questions so far? Let's move to some really good information. So we have reinstituted this year DIBELS testing, kindergarten through 4th grade. And so you can see on this chart, the first 2 red columns. That's oral reading fluency for 1st grade, and the first column is August. And the second column is December, so we're talking about exactly 4 months in school. And you can see the increase there in oral reading fluency. And then in the second 2 columns show oral reading fluency and accuracy. We're really glad to see oral reading fluency, which is number of words read per minute. We're really happy to see that increasing. Historically, we have seen both that and the other one decline significantly mid-year in 1st grade. We were never quite sure why, but it did. Not the case this year. However, we need to remember that this is not probably likely for most 1st graders, but let's say someone is reading 100 words a minute, but they only have 50% accuracy. So essentially they're only understanding 50 words a minute. So that's why we always pair fluency with accuracy, because we want students to be able to have higher accuracy. We want to be able to understand more of the words you read than not. 2nd grade, both sets of data, both oral reading fluency and oral reading fluency accuracy, increased significantly from August to December in 4 months' time. For third grade, the fluency, reading fluency drops slightly, but look what happened to the accuracy.
That's good.
It's excellent. It's excellent. And I will tell you, as someone who didn't realize until she was in college that she's a slow reader, that's me. But I've always been an accurate reader. I had to learn to read faster, but not lose that accuracy. So we're really happy about that. And you can see in fourth grade, similar results. In that case, the oral reading fluency, the numbers went up slightly, but the accuracy went up significantly. And as we look at some data, some other data coming up, those will even look more significant to you. On the next page, we're looking at the kindergarten, and you can see that we give 5 brief assessments at kindergarten. None of these last more than about a minute. But Jen has included these for each grade level, particularly for you to look at, in this case, the next to last column, where it says NWF, WRC, because this is nonsense word fluency and words read correctly. And we included this because you notice in August for a kindergartner, we're really excited and think they're doing great if they can read one. Okay, one nonsense word accurately, because we haven't even taught them sounds and combining sounds and those kinds of things. But you can see that in 4 months, we expect them to at least be up to 4. So there's, and then there's the word reading fluency, and that goes from 1 to 5 to 9. So this is also a moving target. So when you look, we don't have kindergarten on this chart, but you will see in a minute that there are similar things. So to have oral reading fluency in August increase in December, it's a moving target. The minimum has increased significantly. So you're talking about students learning a lot of things, and we will get to that in just a minute. Do you have questions about that? It's probably a lot of numbers, but you're going to kind of go with it. It's really easier to see when you look at this. And this is the kindergartners. So on the left, we have phoneme segmentation fluency. And then for the first 2 columns, so you can see a significant drop in the kids who are at intensive, and a significant increase in the students particularly at benchmark. And then the other one is nonsense word fluency, and that's what the words read correctly that we just talked about. And so you can see we had typically, that's fairly typical. They're beginning kindergartners. It's not unusual to have 94% of them not doing well. But look at the significant change in just exactly 4 months. So 79% of the kindergartners in the district have showed significant growth in phoneme seg, and 54% showed significant growth in nonsense word fluency and words read. And I would mention to you that we have a brand new language arts program K through 2. So teachers are learning the program, kids are learning to read, learning to do what they need to do, and we've had this kind of success. I'm very pleased with this for our first year into this program. So here's first grade, next page, and again I would call your attention to the last 2 columns for oral reading fluency and oral reading fluency accuracy. If you look at benchmark in August, it's 21 to 34 words a minute, and then in 4 months later, it's now, the low number is higher than the top number in August. So significant growth is expected. The other columns to the left, the 5 columns to the left, are all used by our teachers to determine small group instruction and intensive strategies for those small groups. When you look at that data in graph form, You can see in the first two columns that the number of, the percentage of students who were in intensive dropped significantly. And so those students moved up to intensive, and some of them moved up to, to strategic, and some of those moved up to benchmark, I'm sure. But you can see that we have that shift, and that's what you want to see during the year. So if this were to continue, I think our numbers in May are going to be pretty awesome. I'm hopeful. And then the accuracy, you can see that that goes up as well. So 86% of students increased significantly both in oral reading fluency and in accuracy. For second grade, I'm going to go back just a second to this one because I want you to look at the accuracy. So at the beginning of first grade, we're only expecting 67% accuracy as benchmark, but 4 months later, we expect that to have moved to 87%. That's a significant change in accuracy. Okay. So then when we go to second grade, you can see that at the beginning of second grade, we expect for benchmark, which is on grade level, 92% accuracy. And mid-year, we expect 97% accuracy to be at benchmark. So you can see this has gone up significantly. So you can see how this is a moving target all the time for what we're doing. And again, the oral reading fluency goes from a minimum, for benchmark, of 51 words a minute to 73. That's 20 more words per minute that are being read. Minimum. So then when you look at it as a graph, a chart, you can see, again, we have significant movement in all of those. And for oral reading fluency, 96% of our second graders in the district we're reading at least one additional word per minute more, but 96% of that 96% we're reading at least 5 words more. So big changes. Okay. Third grade, once again, we use the first 3 columns to for placement in either enrichment reading instruction or grade level reading, but for small group for students who need extra help. And I would again have you look at ORF, that oral reading fluency. In the fall, the minimum for benchmark is 77 words a minute, and in December it's 105. So a significant number of words more per minute. And you notice in the middle of the year, it changes to there is no longer any strategic for accuracy. It is 98%. Okay. So for a student to be considered at benchmark, they have to be reading in the middle of the year, third grade, need to be reading at least 105 words a minute at 98% accuracy to be considered benchmark. Okay. Again, looks very significant when you look at the chart. And the fourth bar there, it shows you that strategic went away. Okay. And if you have questions anytime, stop me. Fourth grade, which is the last grade that we give DIVLs. Benchmark again starts in August at 87 words a minute minimum, and moves to 121 words in December. The research out there indicates that adults should be reading something like 165 to 170 words a minute to read newspapers, and but 98% accuracy. So that's why we really push the accuracy as much as the speed. Okay. And then if you look at that chart, pretty significant change. Not particularly surprising with the fourth bar, where suddenly we're doing the accuracy. When we start the year, when our students started the year with 40% at strategic, it's not particularly surprising that that group split between benchmark and intensive. Didn't split evenly, which is kind of good. Only 12% were, ended up in that intensive group, but I expected that would change. Again, 97% were successful in reading words per minute, and you can see below it. Okay, we move to Galileo results, and these are in tables with huge, lots of numbers, and you will have these to take, and you certainly can look at them at your leisure and let me know if you have questions or let Jen know. Galileo assesses yearly standards. We expect to see growth throughout the year as the students are learning the various grade level standards. So this actually tracks, so whatever has been expected to be taught during first quarter is what's assessed. What's taught in the middle of the year up to then is what's assessed, and as the year goes along. So it's kind of a moving target too, but it's a moving target just like the DIBELS based on how you're teaching. Grades 3 through 5 showed growth in math from 2% at 5th grade to 8% at 3rd grade. Those are not particularly statistically significant numbers. 6th grade slipped a little bit, but keep in mind, we are implementing a brand new math program, and so the kids, I'll use 6th grade as an example. Students in 6th grade, some of them had Eureka Math last year's 5th grade, but many did not. And they certainly didn't have Eureka Math instruction in 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and kindergarten. So we're trying to, we're picking them up in the middle. And so you can see that for 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, where we are picking them up farther in that instructional and process change when they don't have all the background to get to that. So we're seeing that this year. Our anticipation based on what we see happening in the classrooms is that will start to even out. For sure, when you start an entirely new math program with entirely new vocabulary, entirely new way of teaching and learning, it really will take 3 to 5 years for us to see the effects of that. So, I think the most significant way to look at those data on those tables is through the charts here. So here's 3rd grade Galileo results. ELA stayed pretty much the same from first test to second. Significant changes in math from first to second, particularly movement from minimally proficient to partially, and a pretty significant increase in students in proficient. So keep in mind that the green and the blue together combined means passing. And the green and the blue together means passing. 4th grade, similar results in language arts. And once again, some changes in the math. So most of the kids in 4th grade moved from intensive to strategic. But we had some of the kids move on up into proficient as well. I'm sorry, minimally proficient, partially proficient. I'm using DIBELS terms for these, but similar results. And then 5th grade, very similar results both first and second in ELA and math. Mrs. Lott is meeting regularly with the curriculum committee. We also have an instructional leadership team, and we've all talked about the fact that we're not getting a whole lot of visibility from Engage New York in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades. So those groups are considering having us next year, during that year, possibly look at another program. That will be the 3rd year. If we are not getting results next year, then we might want to think about that.
I thought we weren't consistent in that, with all those grades in the reading for the past 3 years. I thought there was some.
I thought last year was the first year.
Last year was the first, this is the second. And if we don't start seeing changes in the 3rd year, then we'll discuss where we might want to go with that. By 3rd year, we should start seeing some changes. I'm not too concerned about this in the 2nd year, just like I would not have been hugely concerned about it in the 1st year. But even the teachers are concerned about the fact that it's pre-level. And so, we'll, no decisions at this point. It's just that we know we want to discuss it next year.
Well, the first year they were instructing
without much
Training.
And I thought there was
yes.
only select.
yeah.
And
some.
some, well, Engage New York, third, fourth, fifth, and, third, fourth, fifth, and up was, pretty much everybody, but we didn't have anything in the lower grades. So, that's my understanding anyway. So, you know, the jury's out, we wanna see where it goes. When you look at sixth grade, on the other hand, we can see some significant changes from, in ELA, and that's also using Engage New York. So this gives us some, you know, encouragement that maybe it will start showing results in those other grades as well, so, which is why we don't wanna make any decisions now. Yeah, they kind of rocked it, look at all the, you know, the huge change in, from minimally proficient on up. And, you know, we're talking about a 15% decrease in minimally proficient and an 11% increase in proficient, at the top. So, you know, that's pretty significant. And once again, the math is pretty level for the reasons we've already talked about. Seventh grade, fairly even in language arts. And keep in mind, these are the students who've had none of that, other than some of the classrooms did not have Eureka Math. And as we get farther into math skills and concepts, you know, they're missing more of those underlying pieces. I will tell you that I've been in those classrooms, 7th and 8th grade math classrooms, and the teachers are working really hard to backfill some of those, you know, some of those missing things. Kind of hard to do what you're supposed to do this year and backfill at the same time. Yeah. 8th grade, same kinds of issues, so keep in mind, they're even farther from the beginning parts of this. And then the last slide here with the tables, we have, the first two represent algebra. And if you remember from the state testing, our 8th grade algebra testing students last year rocked. They were at 98% passing, and that exceeded the state average significantly. So we were really shining in that. However, this coming year, 8th graders will no longer be able to take the AZ Merit algebra test. So they will be taking the regular AZ test that everybody else is taking. But you can see that these students, these are algebra students, and that they've increased significantly from minimally proficient to partially, and then the proficient has increased too. So I'm making I think that will be pretty good. And then you look at our science, and I told you back at the beginning when we were talking about the school grades that science kind of pulls us out of some things. And so when you think about green and blue together being passing, pretty high percentages there for us, and that's very nice. So, what are we doing about it? I've explained that we have introduced Amplify, which is the company that produces Amplify is the same company that worked with New York State to develop Engage New York. And at the end of that contract, when they had helped New York rewrite all of their math curriculum, the company took the same program and then I kind of think of it as putting it on steroids. You know, fix things that they thought needed to be fixed, beef things up. And so the Amplify K through 2 is a very powerful program for our kids. And then using DIBELS as our assessment, which really gives us lots of data from which to make decisions. So I've just listed those two things and continuing to use Engage New York. And then in math, the Eureka Math, everybody is teaching it, everybody's using it. It's a very different program than we've used in the past. It's a very new way of teaching as well as a new way of learning. Mrs. Lott made a presentation to the leadership group that the Women's Council sponsors each year. Made a presentation to them last week and gave them a lower elementary math problem. And they were using their phones and Googling the answers. And she said, you're missing the point here. We're trying, you know, it's not getting the right answer. We want you to understand how it is different that we're teaching students to do math. And so And then the instructional team spent some time talking about, because we have both of these programs that are so new, going simultaneously, language arts and math, you know, how do we want to do our professional development? And they all said, let's focus right now. Let's focus on the math. Let's really do it. So instead of the wide spraying, we're focusing that trend this year. So targeted professional development for math. So I'll try to answer any questions you might have. Pretend I'm Jen and answer.
It was broken out really well. The graphs will make it easier to read.
Well, and I'm hopeful that if you get questions from the community or from parents, that you know, you now have a little bit of data, and of course, anybody can come in and talk with us anytime that they want to. I sent a thank you out to everybody after having reviewed all of these data, everybody, all of our employees, because it takes everybody. You know, it's not just the teachers, but everybody. And thank them for the hard work that they've done when lots of times they're learning just ahead of the kids what they're doing. And not to be discouraged by those grades, those school grades that are assigned by AD. You and I know we have a lot better things going on in our schools, in all of our schools, than those grades reflect. And so I don't want anybody to feel like they have a red letter on their chest or on their back, and I certainly don't want kids to feel that way. And not to focus on the state testing necessarily. We're doing all of these things that we need to do. In 2 to 3 years, we will see a difference in the results on the state test. They will take care of themselves. So we just need to keep an eye on what we're doing.
I like that perspective.
Thank you.
Anybody have any comments? Questions? Oh, go ahead.
The third grade curriculum, I know you guys are talking about possibly changing in the future, just keep in mind we've been doing it for 3 years, and then all of the kids that we've had come up have knowledge.
Exactly. That's a very good point. That is a very good point.
Backfilling for 3 years also.
Yeah.
So.
And that's why you all will be involved in that decision.
Yeah.
That's not going to be, that's not gonna be me saying we're gonna do this.
Like, we're really excited to see where it goes in the next couple of years
Yes.
with the curriculum.
Yes.
So just
And that's, and the other good point about that is seeing what second grade is doing, because those are the kids you're getting next year.
Yeah.
So seeing the Dibbles results for second grade right now indicates that the kids you get next year are going to be in a whole different place than the ones you got this year.
Right.
Right?
Except in the writing, because I taught second grade, I was a long-term sub at the Diamondback. The new CKLA does not hit writing at all.
Okay, so then that's something
And
that
when they
teachers
go to
will bring
third
up,
grade,
and
they have to.
we need to figure out how to make that
Yeah,
happen.
there's no writing with it.
Okay.
And then just because consistently, I taught third grade for 6 years, consistently, third grade scores were always lower compared to second and fourth grade, and we always got a hard time from it, even though we taught our little hearts out. But then the next year, they would go to
So,
fourth
like,
grade.
Third and fifth grade standards are hard.
They
Yes,
are,
they
they
are.
really
Yeah, I think
are.
fourth grade's like the nice little
Yeah.
review year.
Right, and then they go to fourth grade, and the teachers are so happy with their third graders, and
Which means you did a
yeah,
great job.
because
Which
fourth-
means
fourth grade
third grade
builds.
actually
Yeah.
teachers were doing a great job. It's just
Absolutely.
the standards are very difficult. To,
Yeah, third and fifth
and then
are
they go to
rough.
fourth grade and they're fine, like, and the scores are really good, and so.
And that's why we really need to look at, that's why we really need to look at data other than, or in addition to the state testing. Because that's a 1 week, you know, it's like, okay, I'm dating myself here. It's like a Polaroid. You know, you take the picture and that's what you have. Whereas when we're doing Dibbles and we're doing Galileo, you know, it's not a moving picture necessarily, but it's more like those, like the video where it takes the picture every 6 seconds, you know. So at least you can see the movement as opposed to just this one thing. So we don't want to ignore the state testing, but it shouldn't drive all of our decisions. And I'm also not in favor of one and done. And that's one of the reasons that we want to do the kinds of things that you're suggesting, that we look at all the data and we, you know, and we consider the fact that the kids are coming with better preparation. So, you know, thoughtful decisions as opposed to shotgun decisions. Thank you for that. I think that's a great thing. I forgot about that.
You know, it was a note I did make going through 85,000 pages of reports. Do these ever end? But just that they did show solid growth everywhere, and that I did see on some of the principal reports with the, I think it was Mr. Muick with the interventions through title. So it was good to see that and how
It's
they're
very good to see.
doing that.
Yeah, I am just, I can't tell you how pleased I am with how hard people have been working at this and committed to it, and I'm so appreciative of the hard work and I'm sure that there are days that, you know, that they're bumping their heads against the wall going, what am I doing? You know, we've all been there, so I'm really, really appreciative of their work.
Well, if we have nothing else, I can go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 6:22.
Man, bathroom.
Anyway, in all the material that was submitted, and that took some reading, but in one case it was explaining why our scores weren't so good, and it says, keep in mind, first year with new school configuration, but the bottom line, it says it takes 3 to 5 years to show growth. I'm not so sure that's the message we want to be getting out to our staff and community members. To me, that seems like kind of a long time. I don't know where that came from. It takes 3 to 5 years to show growth, but I sure feel, in my opinion, that should be shortened up. But with that was my comment, and I'm ready for you to adjourn.
Thank you, Doug.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the regular meeting. I call to order the regular meeting of the Bullhead City Elementary School Board on Wednesday, January 15th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. Secretary, please call the roll.
Diane Beardsley.
Present.
Jeannie Orland. Present. Brandy Dubois.
Present.
Doug Lutz.
Present.
Lori Burgess.
Present.
Thank you. Citizens present, please make sure that you sign in at the back of the room on the attendance sheet. Thank you, and thank you for attending. Please join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Madam President, everybody's microphone's on so that Kim can pick up the audience.
I believe so. Thank you. Okay, we're on to 2.5, election of governing board officers for the year 2020. Yeah. Any nominations?
I'll nominate Brandy Dubois as president.
Nominate Corey
Second.
Burgess. I'd like to nominate Corey Burgess as president.
I second that.
All in favor for Brandy Dubois? Or
Probably should do a roll call for Brandy and a roll call for Corey.
oh,
However you want to do that, but you probably should do a roll call.
correct. We're gonna do a new roll call, so when we make a motion, when the president says all in favor, just state your name. That way it's easier for the recording and they can pick it up, and then any objections, just state your name. Thank you. Did you get that? So we don't need to repeat, right? So we've had nominations for Corey and Brandy.
Can I don't know how this works, but I'd rather not.
Use your microphone,
Okay.
There was only one
I would
second.
like to respectfully decline.
There was only one second.
There was a second for Cory.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, I seconded
No,
for Cory.
Brandy
Yes,
seconded.
I didn't hear the second.
Oh.
Doug.
Doug did.
Doug did.
Thank you.
And as president of the board, I'm going to respectfully resign from president, step down from president of the board. So I guess all in favor for Cory as president?
Jeannie Borland?
Brandy Dubois.
Diane Beardsley.
Good luck.
Congratulations.
So as of right now, we have Cory Burgess as the president of the Bullhead City Elementary School Board. Congratulations, you can now take the presidency.
You're not gonna do the other election?
Oh, yeah, well, no, you can do it.
It's not her job anymore.
Kim made a nice cheat sheet for you.
Good.
So
Good.
the pink ones are what you read and the green ones are action.
All right. So we need a nomination for a board clerk at this time.
I'd like to nominate Brandy Dubois.
I second that.
Any other nominations? Okay, at this time, all in favor of Brandy Dubois being the board clerk?
Jeannie Borland?
Diane Beardsley.
Cory Burgess?
Doug Lutz.
If you would, yes.
Brandy Dubois.
You're perfectly entitled to vote for yourself.
You were not.
All right, thank you very much.
Congratulations to both.
Thank you.
All right. Call to, item 2.6, call to the public. Do we have any calls to the public at this time? Where do I put my 1 minute? I got so excited.
No, they're over here. They're right there.
Okay. All right, our first one, Patricia Anacondo.
Does this work?
Yes.
I don't think I'll need it, but I'm a little hoarse today. I subbed in the district. Okay. My name is Patricia Ann Chondo, and I have lived in our community over 38 years, and I also have lived in Mojave County over 50 years. So I have been in the educational system in Mojave County for a long time. I also am a principal and teacher retired of 32 years, most in our elementary school district of the Bullhead City School District. All board members of the Bullhead City Elementary School District, I'd like to welcome you to a Happy New Year. And I do have a few concerns that concern me as a grandmother, as a teacher, and as a mother of some kids that have children in your district, and who also work within the district as well. My first concern is the substitutes within the classrooms. And the ones I'm speaking of is the long terms that have used their 120 days and had to be removed from their classroom and replaced with another teacher. This has affected us last year personally, and it also is affecting us this year. My first grader this year, last year, had a teacher for the year who was a sub, an excellent sub. I taught all 5 of her children. And she was removed to hire a new highly qualified teacher. And that new highly qualified teacher lasted about 6 weeks. And then she was gone. Then they hired another substitute teacher, and that substitute teacher left. Then they hired another substitute teacher, and that substitute teacher left. And then they ended up with the same substitute teacher they had at the beginning of the year. That's a lot of changes for a 5-year-old, even for one that is gifted. I also was the Montessori directress for the Montessori Preparatory Academy as well after I retired. And we all know that consistency with young children is very important. Now I face the same dilemma with my grandson. He is in kindergarten. He'll be tested for gifted soon with the next testing date. He also is going to be losing his teacher. And that teacher coming in is coming in. And the question is, will they stay or will they not? Or will we go through the same thing that we did last year with my kindergartner last year? Now let's talk about large scale in the elementary school district. I know that HQ points are important. I was a principal. I understand that. I understand it's important to have those points. But you're not going to get the HQ points by hiring substitute teachers that are not highly qualified. If the teacher's not highly qualified, you're not going to get that substitute HQ point. The HQ point is important for growth, and you have to have that. But if you hire substitute teachers that are not highly qualified, or even a teacher that is not highly qualified, you're not going to get that point. And it is as simple as asking for an extension for that teacher that's been in the classroom for 4 months. My other question is, looking at the wonderful Dibble scores and the Galileo scores for the upper level, those teachers must be doing something right. And I would like you to look into that, because I personally am getting affected. I have a very highly sensitive first grader. I have another very bright kindergartner that's coming into our community in our public school district. And sometimes I hear little things like, there's other schools in the community. Is my time up? Oh, I have more. Can I go
I'm
real
sorry.
quick?
We'll give you 1 more minute.
Okay, kindergarten graduation. It just came to my attention that the little kindergartners don't get to walk through and get their little certificates and have a little way to go, good job. The other thing is the snacks and the positive community growth and improvement for the concerts and the K through 3 having Christmas concerts instead of just one certain grade. I think you need to involve the community. I think you need to bring them in. And I think it's with those kinds of activities that you do that. And limiting them to only one grade level doesn't do that. The other schools in our community are doing that. They are bringing them in. Loss of the honor roll awards. This is a real killer. Here we have children working their hardest and their best, and how about giving them a pat on the back and giving them some recognition that they deserve? Especially for those who are getting it at home and knowing that this is important for them to do their best and try their hardest. And thank you for the extension. I always was a little long-winded.
Thank you. Next, we have Rusty Dubois.
All right, I'm Rusty Dubois in Bullhead, 1490 Arena. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the band teachers again. I want to make sure that that stays on the priority list. I know that Fox Creek is still without one. I'm sorry, I don't know about the Bullhead Junior High. I think they have one, you know, but I believe it was Fox Creek that was missing it. I know that we just had graduation at NAU, GCU, and ASU. So I would think that they would have some graduates or something like that that we could be going to look at. I don't know if we've talked to any of our music teachers here that just graduated, that we just hired, to see if they know anybody from that program, that we can get somebody here. I also want to recognize to you guys, to make sure that you guys are aware, Michelle Rivlin and Cameron Pruitt, they are going to Fox Creek on their own time on Fridays to start helping the band program over there and the choir program. Really thankful for them. I think that they're stepping up, helping us out. I think it'd be really nice of us to send something to them saying thank you for doing that. They're doing that on their own time, but they really need some help on their programs up at the high school. We built the high school program to be championship programs, and we are dwindling in numbers because we don't have schools that are feeding them. They need help. I don't really want to go in too much of this. I'd like to pass you guys out a letter that was given to me by a couple of the high school teachers, okay? I don't really want to go into it. I just want you guys to have this letter so you guys can read that. I don't know if that's okay, if I just give you guys letters on that stuff so you can read it. Like I say, I don't want to go into what's in the letter.
We'll make sure we share with Mr. Lutz.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Randy Dubois.
All right, thank you very much. Randy Dubois, 1490 Arena Drive, Bullhead City. And I just want to talk to you about the high school board meeting. On Monday night, my husband and I, Russ, you just heard from him, each made a call to the public at that Monday night crush board meeting. And I feel that the newspaper article to follow failed to get our point across accurately. The wording of the heading stated we were complaining about a weekend homework assignment, when in fact we were bringing attention to a mandate from Superintendent Mr. Flora, that every teacher in every class, including the arts, band, choir, PE, has to have a homework assignment over the weekend for the rest of the year, every single weekend. So, and probably including next year too. So when we were there, we also asked how many teachers were consulted before this mandate was given. And we had talked to several teachers and we could find none. So just mostly I want to make it clear as a board member that I am not against weekend homework, that I do value the importance of homework. And also, just because I had so much backlash negatively from the link with the article on Facebook, it said that parents were complaining about a weekend homework, and I got called, my husband and I, he was the one stated in the article, lazy, whiny, and cared more about partying at the river than my own child's education. So I just want people to know, parents and teachers, that they can come here and have their voice and we will hear them, and I hope to encourage them, and that the district would feel free to that they would feel free to respectfully speak their minds without fearing the community administrators, and that teachers and parents' opinions should always be valued and given consideration. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 2.7. Adoption of the agenda. Can we get a motion?
Make a motion, we adopt the agenda.
A second.
All in favor?
Jeannie?
Aye.
Randy Dubois.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess?
Doug Lutz.
Item 2.8, superintendent's reports.
You had reports sent to you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about those.
I have a question for Superintendent. The question is, did they remove all the hall title at the Bullhead Middle School? And I saw the pictures. It looked kind of nice, but it's just shined up concrete now. Is that correct? And what happened with the concern with the gymnasium?
Doug, those are a couple of questions, so I will answer. Yes, over fall break, the company that got the bid to remove the asbestos tile came in and did so when there were no people in the building, in the facility, and that was all done, appropriately and following the law and all of those restrictions. And then the week of New Year's, the company that got the contract to grind down the concrete that was remaining and then polish it did so. And actually, Kim, if you want to put those pictures up right now, I was going to show these photos. Oh, wrong ones. I went over today to look, and Mrs. Pietri and I walked the campus. So in the hallways in the main building, all of the tile were removed, and the baseboards because the baseboards were in contact with the asbestos tile. And then kind of a bonus, the old lockers, the ones that were remaining, were removed so that all of the tile could be removed under those. And then the pony walls that were at the end of the lockers were removed. So it opened up the hallway considerably. I did these photos today. It looks very nice and shiny. If you walk on the floor, Doug, you see of course, seams, concrete seams and things you would expect to see. And then the places that were uneven that had to be ground down so that the floor was level. The surface of the concrete itself is not like we ordinarily see on a sidewalk or whatever. You tend to see more of the rocks and the composite that's in the concrete. But the buffing has just made it all smooth and shiny. And I happened to ask the crew, because they were there today to inspect it after 2 weeks of school, how they're going to maintain that polish and that shine, and that's just maintained with a buffer. So the concrete is not sealed; it's just the concrete, and then that buffing. And when they did it, they did increasingly finer buffing tools. They started with a fairly gritty one and then worked down to the really fine one. They were there actually to look to find out why there were some ugly brown spots in the concrete, and they had contacted a concrete contractor, who indicated that particularly in older concrete, there seems to be some oil that was in the concrete at the time, and you would know better than I, Doug, how old that building is. But some of the oil is coming up through the concrete and will evaporate and that kind of thing. So as the buffing process goes on, those brown spots are supposed to disappear as we go through the process. So it looks very nice, and we'll get the baseboards in and get the walls painted where the lockers have been taken out, and it should look very nice. In terms of the gym, that really was not part of that contract. We're still working on the repair for the end of the gym that needs where those holes are. Because the gym was not asbestos, so it was not part of that project.
Thank you.
Yes.
I did get a contact by ABM today, and there's somebody coming tomorrow actually to take a look at the gym and see what next steps are. So that is something that's still in progress. I just got an email this afternoon.
Wonderful. All right.
And then if you don't have other questions about the things that were submitted, I do have some miscellaneous updates for you. We've added that to the agenda because, as you know, there are things that happen after the agenda gets posted and things get sent out to you. So I have 2 or 3 things. One is not a particularly new one, but I did want to update you that the application that we made to the state for the state school safety award grants, we were awarded a continuation of the position for the school resource officer at Fox Creek, and for 4 counselors for the other 4 schools. Wow. We were ecstatic. There were the total requested from 890 schools. If there had been the funds, it would have cost almost $100 million to fund all those positions. And of course, they only had $32 million to spend. We were very fortunate to get 4 of the counselor positions. We will be interviewing 4 candidates this Friday. Some of them will not be able to start until, if they're acceptable, will not be able to start until the fall, but that's fine. As long as we have people in place by August, we will receive the funding. But we're hopeful that at least one of these folks might be suitable and available soon for that position. Another one is just an update. I had mentioned to you all in the past that we were looking at spending the $21,000 insurance payment for the bus that was totaled on the Parkway last spring to possibly purchase special ed bus. Will and Dennis, who is the maintenance person, were in Phoenix this week and went to the bus vendors to look at buses. There was one that we had seen photos of, and it was okay. It wasn't particularly great shape, and it had, I think, 190,000 miles or something like that. So they went to another vendor, and they actually found two, and actually the vendor is going to end up with more than that, but right now has two smaller special ed buses, and Kim has photos from those that are in really great shape, have less than 50,000 miles. And if we chose to, we could get two of those for the price of the one other bus. This is a work in progress. We have some questions we need to still ask, and so I just wanted to keep you appraised of the fact that we are, looking at that project. Related to that, we currently have 6 special ed buses, and we transport 167 special ed preschool and Bullhead City Academy students on those 6 buses. So it would seem to me that we have a need for at least one of those, and we'll just keep working on that, and I'll seek your advice on any of the information. It's not, since it's insurance money and it's not coming out of our M&O or our capital, probably we can move on that. And we probably need to, because one way or the other, we either need to tell the vendor we're not interested, or we need to look at moving for 1 or 2. So that's just information. I've already shown you the floors at the middle school. I had told you in the past that we were exploring, I had a committee looking at whether or not we wanted to change student information systems from PowerSchool, and they were looking at Synergy. That committee met for their concluding meeting today, and they have in fact recommended moving to Synergy for a number of reasons. One is that we would purchase it through ETC, which is a consortium with NAU, and they provide, in that contract, they provide not only the initial training, but training anytime we need it for no extra cost. They also would store our data, and it would be available to us perpetually, but they store it, which is critical to us at this point when we're concerned about our servers. And so any of the data that's related to student information system would be stored off-site, so that would be helpful. The other part of that is another concern that they had, and that they, in their decision, almost all of our surrounding districts already use Synergy. We're the only one using PowerSchool, and you and I know how often students transfer back and forth among schools. This would give us the ability to digitally transfer information and data, academic records, discipline records, and all of those kinds of things. And then finally, they are also looking at, ETC is looking at adding Visions, which is our business software, and we could potentially end up with a pretty good deal from that, and for some savings as well. The bottom line figure is that over 5 years, the initial cost of switching over, there is some initial cost for some changes in the first year, but when we take all of the annual costs and spread it out over 5 years, it breaks even with what we're paying for PowerSchool right now. So we're not talking about any additional expense except in year 1, and then that washes out over the next 4 years. So just wanted to keep you informed of that. The last thing for my update, last week I had the opportunity to be part of a superintendent's panel at the Women's Council leadership class. Whitney Crow and John Warren from TOPOC were the other members of the panel. Lance asked some pretty insightful questions, put us on the spot, and the people participating in the leadership workshop asked us some pretty good questions. It was a good experience. It was, I thought it was fun because the 3 of us get along well, and so we could joke and still give serious information to the people, the future leaders in our community.
Did we have any questions on the reports?
I do have a comment, Mr. President. A follow-up on Carolyn's mention of the counselors, which is great news, but Doug Ducey is proposing to completely fund that program for next year, and also to restore all of our capital outlay that was taken away years ago. So that's very positive, and I think we need to follow that for financial reasons.
Absolutely.
I did have a question with the switch over to Synergy. We had that presentation from James McNutt on needing servers. Will
Yes.
this solve that problem, or are we still going to need servers?
Well, first of all, moving to Synergy will reduce some of that need. It will, because then we're not using our servers to store the data. It will be served they will be stored at ETC. The part about Visions, which is all of our business software, he was telling me today that about 60% of our server usage is used up with the Visions program, with our business software. So if ETC, this consortium, moves to Visions from the current program that they're supporting right now, and if we were to go with them, once again, all of the data would be stored off-site. And so that would take a huge load off our current servers, and it would make it much less critical for us to, try to come up with the funds to replace those. And at the point where we would replace them, we would not have to replace so many or so much, so that it would bring that expense down over 60%. It's pretty amazing, yeah. So I wanted you to be informed of that, so that you were aware that it's not just it's a huge convenience difference for us, but it could potentially be a huge savings for us as well.
Thank you. Item 2.9, donations. I'd like to publicly thank all of those that donate to our school. Fox Creek was able to receive a boulder decoration for their campus from Rim Country Rock and Yard, $400 value, and $1,000 from Walmart. Sunrise Elementary, $2,000 check towards the purchase of Promethean panels from the Sunrise PTA. And Desert Valley, 25 knitted hats from Deanna English, Hearts and Hands, $125 value. We're always very thankful for the donations that come from our community. They make so many things possible. Item 2.1, 210, board member updates. Do we have any updates at this time?
Comments?
Yes.
Yeah. I was going over all the principal reports, and I just wanted to say good job. I feel like they all look the same finally. And the calendars were great. And Diamondback, I had seen like the interventions area on the Dibbles. I like seeing that, and the index card houses, and the fact that the kids had to present to try to sell them was pretty neat, thinking outside the box. So that's a fun project. And Sunrise cracked me up with their paper gingerbread houses. Not gonna lie, I'd rather have the apple. And 6 more Promethean boards. That was super exciting. How many classrooms do you have that need them yet?
It would just be the kindergarten before.
Nice. And can I ask a question to Bullhead Middle School?
We have administrative reports.
Yeah, it's on the consent agenda.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
The immunization suspensions, was that all related to not having their immunizations, like the 22 days suspensions?
Yes, and that's why I wanted to let you know, because the attendance numbers look low, and some of it is because of that. There's an immunization that has to be given to 11 or 12-year-olds, and that's where the 11 years old. So they don't take it, they don't have to have it until they're 11. And so we give them notice, we try and give them a couple of weeks, but at some point, we have to say, there's gotta be consequence. And the thing that I thought was interesting is it has reduced, because in September, there were 9 students that were suspended for 21 days, but November, there was nobody, everybody got them done on time. The city has a free immunization clinic every week. And so we give parents basically 2 opportunities to go to the free clinic. So in December, there were only 4, and it was for a shorter period of time. So we try and work with the parents when we can, but we fight for suspending those students. And that is state law.
Yeah, are they allowed to do their work while they're suspended if they're not attending
Oh, yes,
classes?
you bet.
Okay,
Oh,
okay,
definitely.
okay.
There's a few things for that.
And I liked your pictures, the folk dancing, and I was gonna ask who teaches them. I saw them on the other agendas. employees coming in? Are they teachers or are they outside?
No, actually, they're cafeteria workers, they're parents, both of them are
fun.
parents.
It looked really
of our own
fun.
students, yeah.
Yeah, and I really liked how you had your goals at the bottom, like, these are our goals at the bottom.
Yeah.
So, and those are about, there you are. I liked how the Eureka Math, the teachers thought it was beneficial for them. It was nice to see that they're liking the trainings that are happening. You know, a lot of times we hear they're not beneficial. And I like the growth in your test scores, and over 400 families for your holiday concerts that's a lot of families. I don't think Miss Malloy is here, but I want to thank her for going to that Creating Connection in Tucson and bringing that back to the teachers. And Fox Creek, I liked all your enrichment programs that were coming up for the kids with the PSAT and the STEAM and the high school coming in for music. But what is Fishbones for staff development?
I believe we worked on those, and it was stemming from the needs assessment. So we were fishboning like how to keep, or how to retain and keep qualified teachers.
Good
was
one.
one section, and then that was the one I sat in on. I forget what the other group was doing, but I think that's what that came from.
All right. And
It's part, Mr. President, I'm used to saying Madam President, I'm sorry. The fishbone is a term, but it's part of the school improvement plan, and it's a piece that they all have to do. And somewhere along the line, they've just named it the fishbones.
It's like just a brainstorming session.
Yeah.
Okay.
What causes the problem, and then what are some of the solutions towards that problem that we could think of. So.
Nice. And who won the student-teacher volleyball game? They had pictures, but we didn't know who won. Teachers, nice. And Kim, great work on getting the shade expedited for the little preschoolers over there. Yay.
Yeah, that has its own issue. We got the shade part fixed, and when they came to fix it, they noted that the welds are all failing. And so we did submit to the trust to see if they would replace the parts and the welding. They will not. And so unfortunately, that's going to be a project that we will have to do out of capital outlay. But we've closed the playground again because that covers the entire playground, and we want our kids safe. So we're going to move on that just as quickly as we can.
And I liked 0 disciplinary hearings in December. That was really nice number to see. That's all my comments.
Great. Anyone else?
So are we on, is that 3.2 where we, is it?
That's actually consent.
Okay.
We can't discuss it once it's on.
Okay.
But we can have something pulled from consent if you want to discuss it.
Oh, no, I just wanted to comment on the reports also. So, okay, and so yes, thank you very much. They were all more cohesive and easy to read with the new format. I really appreciate that. And a lot of the same things I noticed. We're doing many incredible things. I appreciate all the teachers and administrators' work. And the census, the school census that the middle school did, that looked really fun. Good. I'm excited for the census. It only comes around once in a while, so I like those kind of things, like Olympics, when they come around to really like delve into that too with the students. And then I just had a question. I didn't know where we don't have award ceremonies for kindergarten through 2nd grades anymore. Is that something that's happening?
Remember, we have moved to, I just went blank, proficiency.
Okay.
And we don't have letter grades.
Okay.
We haven't had
Right.
letter
They
grades at
haven't had
kindergarten
letter
through
grades.
2nd grade for a long time.
Right.
So moving to the competency-based scoring, then, and competency-based, if you recall, is similar to what we were looking at of proficient, minimally proficient, those things that match the state testing and those categories, and that's part of what we did in our grading system that you all approved earlier in the year. And those don't equate to A, B, C, D, so there's no real way to say, this is an honor roll type thing for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. We only start the letter grades at 3rd grade. So there's no real way to determine who's, and are we going to recognize a student for being at grade level, because that's what proficient would be. And we want to recognize all students for their growth and their proficiency, as opposed to having, what their letter grade might be.
Okay,
They'll still have the awards things and whatever they want for
They still
third
have
grade on up.
attendance awards for those
Yeah,
like grade
sure, they can
levels?
have all of
Okay.
those things. We want to recognize students for their successes.
Permission to speak?
Yes.
I was under the impression that when we voted that in, that we agreed to do both the letter grades and the competency, and that, because I feel we were all in disagreement with taking away the letter grades.
The letter grades have always been 3rd through 8th grade. There had not been letter grades below that, and if some school was doing that, I don't recall that being in any of the practice. It wasn't when I was at Coyote, it wasn't, if it was put in place in the 4 years I was gone, that might be the case, but there were not letter grades in K through 2 in the past.
I think did we use percentages to give awards, or?
It was 4s, 3s, 2s, 1s.
4, 3s, 2s, and 1s.
But it's still, 4s and 3s and 2s and 1s do not equate to A, B, C, and D in an honor roll kind of thing. But I will bring that back if you'd like. I would bring that back to discussion with the principals and come back to you.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was something the teachers were for or against, or if there was a lot of parent feedback. I know the one lady that spoke was kind of against that too, so I'm just wondering how that was going.
And we do want to, we're trying to make the transition, as you recall from our discussion about grades, trying to make the transition from a focus on letter grades and to a focus on competencies and those kinds of things. So, that's a transition. You don't do that just overnight and whatever. I would encourage you to read the article that I did send out to you today, talking about one of the top schools in the country has moved away, and it's, they've moved away from those things. And it was just an interesting article to me for a district that didn't have to make those kinds of changes to make them. So it was just information for you. But I will bring it back to the leadership team and the instructional team and come back to you.
May I speak?
Yes.
I just, I was kind of taken back by that. I just think that, I think they need to be recognized. That's my personal opinion. But I think we're trying to build that community with the parents and that collaboration and the participation. And those little guys, I mean, they are just as much if their older brother or sister come home. And I just think we need to really look at that. And I would hope we can kind of rectify that and at least have some ceremony, some kind of recognition thing. I think that really needs to build that, keep that community input involvement.
We had a letter that said we had one coming, and then it was canceled. We had people coming from out of state, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents.
Yes, so we can take a look into that.
Sure.
And figure out which direction we want to go. Did we have any other comments? All right, moving on. The consent agenda. Can we get a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I would make a motion to adopt it, but I would like to have 3.2, 3.3, and 3.6 pulled.
3.2, 3.3,
3.6.
3.6.
There's nothing,
The
there's nothing in
3.6 is empty. Did you want to discuss future travel, or?
I was confused about that one too. I had to call Kim because it's this different setup, and under it says none. So they're just there like an outline, but there's nothing. So we need a training.
I can change that.
She asked me about leaving it in, and I said, so that we remember we have that item every month, but I don't care if it's taken out. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's up to you. It's your agenda.
Well, there are no travel requests.
No.
Is that correct?
There are no travel requests on this agenda.
Okay. So no need to pull it then.
So Doug, your motion was to approve the consent agenda with pulling 3.2 and 3.3, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Brandy Dubois.
Jeannie Borland.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess?
Doug Lutz. 3.2, I'm just curious why there's no report for Chartwells and transportation.
Chartwells has not been providing reports much this year, Doug, but I will find out about that because we do need it. And I'm sorry, I was unaware that we did not have one from transportation. You're right, we don't. Nor do we have one from technology. I will find out why we are not getting those. Thanks for calling that to my attention.
Do we need a motion to approve that now, Mr. President?
Let's address 3.3.
Okay. And my question there is, on the folklorical addendum, I see it's $35 an hour. Now, it seemed like always in the past we had a set dollar amount so the district knew what the budget for and they could control it. Are we moving the other way by putting in a $35 per hour? That's a little scary to me.
Mr. President, I'll answer that. Doug, these are positions funded with the 21st Century Grant, so it's not out of M&O dollars, and those are the dollar amounts that have been paid to teachers and folks who are doing those programs. I even recall that amount 5 years ago, so those amounts are written into the grant and are paid from the 21st Century Grant.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. As long as we don't get confusion or one leads to the other here, I can accept that.
No fear on that.
Do we have any additional questions for items 3.2 or 3.3?
No.
Can I make a comment on 3.2?
So I move that items 3.2 and 3.3 be approved.
I would second that. All in favor?
Brandy Dubois.
Jeannie Borland.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess.
Doug Lutz.
I'm sorry, you had a question?
I just wanted to make a comment in regards to the
Could you come forward, please? If you'd state your name too, please.
Good evening, my name is Estella Baxter. I'm with Travis Food Services. I'm the Assistant Director of Dining Services. I'm here to represent for our board report, and I just spoke with Alex, who is the Director of Dining Services, and he stated that he did submit the report. It is on a new format. It was sent late, though. So
Well,
I
he said
will.
that there was a new format. He said that was not sent as this is a report.
Okay, maybe there was that misunderstanding, but I will make sure that the reports are through Alex sent every month for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Doug, did you catch that?
No, sir, I didn't.
The lady that just spoke to us is from Chartwells. The report was sent in a separate format, so it wasn't identified, but we will have that each month.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to old business. Item 4.1, policy GCF, professional staff hiring.
Mr. President, this is the second reading of this policy, and it is the one that you all had last month. And there's only one change in the policy, and that is changing the paragraph that says a professional candidate's acceptance of a contract offer must be indicated within 15 days from the date of the written contract or the offer is revoked. So the only change there was from 30 to 15.
Could we have a motion to approve item 4.1?
Make a motion, we approve item 4.1.
I second.
All in favor?
Brandy Dubois.
Jeannie Borland.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess.
Doug Lutz.
Item 4.2, policy GCO, evaluation of professional staff members.
Mr. President, this is the second reading of this policy as well. The correction was to remove the section that's in bold that was essentially the instructions from ASBA to us as a district on what to do to complete this policy. So obviously we don't need those directions as part of the policy. And then following that, the changes to A under inadequacy of classroom performance to change from 320 points to 117 points for ineffective, because we don't even have 320 points on the current evaluation. And then we added B, the teacher has been teaching more than 1 year in the district and receives a rating below 203 developing as set forth in the district's teacher evaluation system. So these two corrections, A and B, make this policy match the actual document, teacher evaluation document that the board approved a year ago.
Okay. Can we get a motion to approve item 4.2?
I motion we.
Doug Lutz.
Go ahead, Doug.
I move. No, go ahead.
Okay, I motion we approve 4.2.
I second.
All in
Doug
favor?
Lutz.
Brandy Dubois.
Jeannie Borland.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess.
Doug Lutz.
Item 4.3, intergovernmental agreements.
Mr. President, Mrs. Beardsley asked that we add this to the agenda following the conversations that happened at the high school board on Monday evening. And so, let me look at this. You have in front of you a copy of the agreements from fiscal year 19. It was the agreements from fiscal year 20 that the high school board chose not to take any action on. And of course the concern that was expressed, that Diane expressed, and in fact Jeannie also contacted me and expressed concern about the fact that since they did not take action on the new IGAs, where do we go from here? So I wanted you to have that information. And then I also have placed in front of you, and Kim, if you would put this up so folks can see it. It's not on there, I know, but I see it. If you would, please. I put in front of you this document that is just a summary. And I'll give you a little background so you kind of have a little knowledge of things before you discuss where you want to go with this. On June 6th of this year, I met with Mr. Hoekstra had a meeting with me and with Mr. Flora and Mrs. Hart from the high school district and presented this document. And then indicated that Mr. Hoekstra chaired the meeting, indicated that the fiscal 19 numbers that you see there, the percentages, that then they were requesting changes where you see fiscal year 20. And essentially the direction at the time, I'm looking at my notes from June 6th, were to split the business offices back out, and otherwise for Mr. Flora and me to work on agreements to present to the two boards. I also share this document with you because if you notice at the bottom, it lists the buildings and how that was handled in spite of the fact that there was no actual IGA. And then there were actually some other things that happened. So you notice I have handwritten in, first of all, I handwrote in John King's name. He's our payroll person because they left him off the list. So up there under DO, I've put him in there. And then you notice number 8, I've added Sally Espinosa, who is our psychologist. And in the process of having our account clerk produce for me the evidence of this pay, of things actually being paid in accordance with what you see under fiscal year 19 here, I had her pull those documents. And in the process, she recalled that even though Ms. Espinosa was employed by our district, somewhere during the year last year it came to, Mrs. Clark's attention that Sally was actually doing quite a bit of work for the high school. And so I don't know who made the decision, but somehow or other the decision was made to invoice the high school district for 50% of her salary. And we have a copy of that invoice. So what you see here is how things were done regardless of how things were mentioned in those 5 IGAs. And the 5 IGAs don't spell out any percentages for anybody or dollar amounts or any of those kinds of things, for which our district was cited in both its annual audit last year and in the performance audit. So those citations, those recommendations were part of the reason that initially Mr. Flora and I worked really hard to make sure that the new IGAs had those things spelled out. So that gives you a little bit of background, and Kim is going to find this so you all can see it in the audience as well. But the documents that actually have folks' salaries and those things, I just made one copy for you to look at as the board so you could see that actually we did invoice the high school, and the high school did in fact invoice us for some things in accordance with this. So I wanted you to know that it did happen regardless of what was written. And just give you some background information on that before you have your discussion.
So number 8, the psychologist, is she 50-50 then? Is that what?
This year she's 100% for our district. We never saw any,
Did you guys want to see this?
we pay at 100% of her salary. And currently there, we kind of have a gentleman's agreement, if you will, because of some things that have happened in the special ed department at the high school, that she is in fact helping the high school with some things, and we would be invoicing the high school for some of that. So sometimes things come up, you know, even outside of IGAs and those kinds of things. And it's perfectly legal for intergovernmental agencies to have some verbal agreements and some of those kinds of things. We'd much rather have it formalized. But when circumstances demand that some work needs to be done now, you can't wait around for the paperwork necessarily to be done. So we are handling that. But right now she's 100% our employee.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so on these invoices you have for between, this one is Crush billing us, and they're all stamped paid, so we've paid them.
Yes, everything's been paid from both directions.
So these, even though they're not
Yes.
stamped,
Yeah,
have-
they've all been paid. And I put them for you in each set has 2, so it has like, because, you know, we bill twice a year, December and June. So you can see on all of those that they're dated, thank you, they're dated for, you know, for those times, either December or January and then June, for those payments.
And I remember this with the worksheet with the different colors and whatnot. And we didn't we approve this? But they haven't approved it, or does it? This one outside of these.
No, well,
or
this
these were
was
reflective
just,
of-
I wanted to give you some background on why Mr. Flora and I proceeded the way we did. Because one of the things we noticed right away was the part at the bottom that says buildings. That there were, you know, that yes, there were the utilities there, but there was no agreement anywhere written that covered that. And we wanted to make sure if that was the case, that we wanted a formal agreement to do that.
Right, I
So
remember
this
that
was
now,
the
that was a
beginning
workshop.
document.
Right.
Somewhere along the line, I gave you a color-coded one that had, you know, where we actually calculated out things like how many students, how many square feet, how many bus drivers, you know, all of those things that you all use to determine the amounts of money that you wanted in the IGAs for fiscal year 20. So, but I did want you to know that this, on
Yes.
this document, is accurate relative to what actually happened last year.
But I guess my concern is with the IGAs is we have the administrative technology, things like that. We do not have an IGA in place for Coyote Canyon at all. We don't have that shared services IGA in place because that was developed after these came into effect. So I don't think it's in our best interest to wait until later to work on next year's. I think we have to have something in place this year. We have to continue to, you know, do the shared services and be obligated to one another outside of the word of mouth and really have something in place. Because we have, there's a lot at stake. I'm not trying to, you know, we're two districts, but we're picking up a lot of extra expense by not agreeing to a contract, and that's taking away from our salaries, our students, our ability to put air conditioners in the bus barn, things like that. We're jeopardizing our financial stability. And I think working together, I believe that we need to continue to keep the IGAs. They do show that we can save. However, if we're not going to be sharing services, or both parties aren't going to be agreeing to it, then maybe we ought to look at some other steps. I mean, I don't know. That's my fear, is we can't hold both districts.
Mr. President, one thing I would say to you is that I'm hopeful that you will direct me to go back and say, please at least approve the administrative, the transportation, and the technology, because neither district can financially afford not to have those agreements. You know, so I'm hopeful that you know that you will certainly encourage me or have me go back and address that with Mr. Flora and have him address it with his board. Relative to all the others, that's open for your discussion and your decision. But we financially cannot afford not to have those three agreements.
Yes, and we also do need to be covered. So if Coyote Canyon's not in there, we need to have something for it. So I agree totally. Any other?
My concern is from sitting in on the high school meeting on Monday night, and I know you had left before he had spoke, but Mr. Flora had stated that he advised his board to not go with any of the IGAs, that he felt they needed to wait and start working on IGAs for the following school year, and that they did not budget for these expenses. But my thought is we did not budget for these expenses either with them utilizing our facilities. I don't think we were asking for too much, saying we would like a 50-50 agreement. I don't think anywhere in there did we ask for more than a 50-50 agreement.
Well, we did. We had some that were 60-40, but nothing much different than that. They were close.
But when we I don't want to say counter offered, but I'm saying
that was only on the one that we counter offered, I thought.
All of the utilities and expenses we went at a 50-50, which I don't feel was unreasonable when we're responsible for the upkeep of all of these buildings. I mean, we have 3 buildings and a warehouse that we're responsible for the upkeep on. And I mean, all of us sitting up here have made a commitment to the taxpayers. They're already paying into our district to take care of those buildings. And if they want to go with the difference in the funds, I mean, the high school board is basically asking us to do a gift of public funds of the taxpayers' money to take care of that stuff for them. And I don't feel that's fair on our part, because we need counselors. We need things fixed at our schools. We need handicap access in. We need new floor at the Bullhead Middle School gym. I mean, we have needs too in our budget, and they can't just not sign an agreement while they're utilizing this for a year and a half because it's not in their budget.
So if I'm understanding correctly, we'd like to direct the superintendent to get back with Mr. Flora, and we need to get something in place.
And can we put a date specific on it? Like, we need to have this done, maybe a target date, because I think we're just going to keep rolling. It's just going to keep snowballing, and we're going to find ourselves sitting up here.
And I've also, I mean, my concern too is a little bit more transparency on their end, because it's all over town, they're moving out, so that will leave us with an entire facility empty, and they haven't even mentioned that to us. On top of not signing these, it's a little concerning. It's kind of like a bad renter, you know? And I don't want to have mixed, I mean, I feel like we should be able to sit down and have these discussions that affects both sides.
Good point.
How would you like me to proceed?
That we want to get something back to the board with them and figure out what we're going to do to finish out this school year, because we do have to have something in place.
And maybe we should just
What?
form something for you know, the utilities at Coyote Canyon, or build something? I mean,
We intend, in absence of a new agreement, to continue the old ones in accordance with this until something changes. And where we stand on that legally, I'm not sure, except that we do have folks in our facilities, as Jean pointed out. We had held off, I had Tracy hold off on invoicing the district in December because I thought this would be on their January, you know, and that would change the invoice amounts significantly. So, but in lieu of, you know, it's either nothing or what we had before, and it struck me that at least let's do what we did before in accordance with this, and then sort out the other. But you know, I'll do however you want me to do, obviously.
may I bring up another point? Maybe something along the lines, if they're not ready to do the IGAs, I mean, we should certainly get that in place for Coyote Canyon. There's something legally needs to be there. Maybe a compromise of some form of the community use of the school facilities, like we're doing. Yeah, I mean, you can word it however you want, not this exact one, but something along those lines. So I think we need something for both parties.
Okay. So that I have a little wiggle room, are you wanting to meet with the high school board again, or do you want Mr. Floor and me to work on something, or how would you like to
start with superintendents and go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on that? All right. And we are on to, we just went with direction there, so we just need to go on to 5.1. Item 5.1, new business, use of facility documents and forms.
As a result, Mr. President, as a result of our discussions in the workshop last month relative to the request for use of the old kindergarten building at Mountain View by We Care for Animals, I dug in the files and found a lease agreement that had been written in 2014. And so I updated it. I felt it needed some updating. And then the fee schedule that was on the one in 2014, you know, it's 5 years later. And so, so I'm proposing to you approval of this document, which then becomes an exhibit in our board policy. So it is not just buried in a file someplace. It is an official document. It can be approved on one reading. Exhibits can be approved on one reading. But that would include all of the wording in there and what we would charge for custodians and for equipment and for use of our facilities. The 4 classifications of use, that's not new. That was in the thing before. All I did was adjust some of those amounts on that table to what seems much more reasonable, especially in light of what we are charged on the front side, where it's like charging for custodians and that kind of thing. In the past, it was $25 an hour, and we are being charged $35 an hour by ABM. So that's a losing proposition for us. So I wanted to make sure we were at least covering our expenses for use of custodians and those kinds of things. So I tried to make all of those things more consistent and more current for 2020 as opposed to 2014.
And this is for leases moving forward.
This would be the template for leases moving forward. And then I used this whole document and the whole descriptive document and adapted it for the one that I offered to We Care for Animals. Took out some things that they're not using an auditorium, they're not using some of those things. So and they're not doing athletics. So I took out some of the specifics that didn't apply to them. And so, so it would give us a template to be consistent.
So in a situation like that, it would still be a template, because if we have somebody that doesn't need stuff, we'll still have the flexibility to move stuff around where
Right.
need.
What
Okay.
I do is, this just becomes the template, and then what we do if we have a lease agreement with some other group is go through and pull out the sections that are not going to apply to what they're doing in just use. But the table for the fees and those kinds of things would apply. It's just some of the sections that describe legalities that, otherwise you end up with a 20-page document for every lease agreement, and we can surely bring that down to 12 or 15 instead of 20.
Any discussion on this item? Okay, with only needing one reading, I'd like to move that we approve the use facility document and form as our template.
I would second that, Doug Lutz.
All in favor?
Brandy Dubois.
Jeannie Borland.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess.
Doug Lutz.
Thank you.
Moving on, item 5.2, Exhibit KFEA, community use of school facilities.
Mr. President, in working on that lease agreement document, I in fact had to reference KF-EA, which is another exhibit, and realized that it did not have a reference into it to the vape products, use of vape products on our campuses and our properties, and then things being sold. In terms of vape products, we have other policies that include the statement tobacco, smoking, and use of vape products. So I recommended this to you as a change so that we're consistent from policy to policy. Excuse me. And then the one about any sales, it's said in the past, any sales are prohibited unless the proceeds will be used for charitable or nonprofit educational purposes. I'm suggesting that we make that a maybe, so we have a little bit of wiggle room in case there's some legitimate use that an outside group might have that does not necessarily benefit a not-for-profit educational. So it gives us a little discretion in choosing that.
Any questions? Now, is this also an exhibit, so a single reading?
This is an exhibit, single reading.
All right. So I would move that we approve item 5.3.
I second.
Or is that 5.2?
That's 5.
5.2, I'm sorry. I'll amend my motion to approve item 5.2.
I second it.
All in favor?
Brandy Dubois.
Jeannie Borland.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess.
Doug Lutz.
Thank you. Item 5.3, Exhibit KFEB, community use of school facilities.
Okay, so again, this is just pulling from that other document that you had, the actual fee table and payment things, and it is replacing a similar exhibit that was in the policy. So I wanted those all to be consistent as well.
Since we...
You approved the other document, which is a full document,
Oh.
but this is just this piece that is in policy.
All right. Any questions on that? Can we get a motion?
Make a motion, we accept 5.3.
A second.
All in favor?
Brandy Dubois.
Jeannie Borland.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess.
Doug Lutz.
Thank you. Right. Item 5.4, possible action to enter in, to accept a statement of charge and recommendation for dismissal of teacher Jeff Mann for authorization for the superintendent to cause the statement of charge to be delivered to the teacher and to dismiss Mr. Mann from employment with the district subject to his right to a hearing. I would like to move to acknowledge the statement of charges and recommend for the dismissal from employment of teacher Jeff Mann to dismiss Mr. Mann from his employment with the district in 10 days subject to his right to a hearing, and to authorize the superintendent to cause the statement of charges to be delivered to Mr. Mann.
Doug Lutz, second the motion.
All in favor?
Brandy Dubois.
Jeannie Borland.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess.
Doug Lutz.
Thank you. Item 5.5, calendar for the fiscal year 2021.
Mr. President, this was discussed during the workshop, and y'all can carry on with any discussion and your decision relative to where we're going with this.
All right.
My concern I had with I don't have really a concern with our calendar, I just, it's gonna be offset with the high school district, and my concern was maybe we should take some more time. I agreed with Brandy when she brought up maybe getting some more teacher input or community input, parent input. Some of those high school kids are gonna be going back to school a week before our kids, and some of those high school kids are ones that, in some of those households, care for those younger kids. So I just didn't know how much of an impact that would make if we were skewed that week. I mean, I do like the fact that you're keeping the short days for progress, or not progress reports, the parent-teacher conferences. I like that. There's just one each semester.
And I know the other issue discussed was if the Boys and Girls Club would be open that week also. So they were gonna look into that.
Which we can determine before you actually make a
Yeah.
decision.
Okay, I apologize for not being here for the workshop. What the reasoning for moving the 1 week?
The calendar proposed for crushed and approved on Monday night has the school year ending a week before Memorial Day. We're in that time that happens every 5 or 6 years when the calendar, when you move your school calendar and you move it a day, and then you get to the place where you've got another week on the end. And so I was simply proposing that we move it so that we actually are ending just before Memorial Day, like we have the last few years, to not have that additional week of heat in July, August. So we would, in fact, the kids would actually start the first week of August on that Wednesday. You know, simply to shift us back. Otherwise, we're just going to keep getting earlier and earlier if we keep adopting the calendar that way. And then the other change had to do with the parent conferences in February. The crushed calendar has those on the same week as President's Day, so there would in effect only be one real school day that week. And I don't think that's a very efficient way to run school, so I'd moved them a week later, and then that shifted Flex Friday and a Red Friday for the schedule. The discussion that the other board members had in the workshop indicated finding out about Boys and Girls Club being closed, because if it's closed and there's no place for our kids to go because their siblings are already in school, that needs to be part of your consideration. And then Brandy already mentioned really wanting to have some other folks involved in the discussion. My intent was to present it to, we're starting to meet and confer. The certified people are meeting next week, week after next, the last week of the month. And the classified people are meeting the first week in February. It struck me that this affects working conditions, and so they should have, they could represent their schools and their sites in that discussion. And then another thing that they all brought up was discussion about fall break, asking that group, getting feedback from our employees about moving fall break back to a week in October as opposed to the full week of Thanksgiving, and getting a lot more input. So, that was their discussion of having a lot more input from our staff, which is what I would really like to have.
And also, I think it'd be more beneficial in the future, and for our community to have a joint effort to align our calendars next year, rather than them, go ahead and accept their own calendar before we even start addressing ours. And so I think for the following year, it'd be better to maybe have a joint meeting on it.
That's a great idea.
Because I think it's better for families. We all have the same calendar, or as close to as we can.
So, right at this point, do we have a motion to table this item, or is that what we're doing?
No action.
Or just no action? No action at this point? Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Moving on to closing items. Item 6.1, future topics. Any future topics?
Maybe our superintendent's contract as it's up at the end of the school year might be a good topic.
All right.
Could we add to that the maybe taking some action on the performance part that y'all need to do by law that we talked about, and having that as part of what's coming up relative to the same discussion?
Certainly.
Should we have an executive session scheduled in the next meeting so we can, for the board, so we can discuss?
To discuss those things.
Yes.
Yes.
just so you remember that by law, that what you end up deciding relative to that performance item must be discussed in public, and an opportunity for some public input. So, and that's in the law. So you might want that to be on the workshop, that item to be on the workshop. You can have all your own ideas about how you want that to look. If you want something different than the sample I gave you, that's perfectly okay. I just was kind of trying to help you out so you didn't have to invent a wheel. And you know, you can have some alternative kind of plan. It's perfectly okay. It's just that by law, there must be allowed some discussion by the public.
So put that in a workshop.
Okay.
I'd like to have just some feedback on Flex Fridays, after school tutoring, before school tutoring, just some feedback from the teachers and the schools on how that's going. I know we had the 21st Century Grant come back to some of the schools too, so I'd just like some more feedback on that.
Awesome.
Do we need to put on there the recognition or awards for the schools and how they're going to shape that, or is that something that's going to be done site specific, or?
Well, we have a kind of marathon leadership team, instructional team meeting coming up, and it'll be on the agenda. So let me kind of get back to you on where they want to go with that. They may want to go back to their faculties and come back. You know, that might not be just a one-time discussion. It might be multiple discussions. So we'll bring it back.
Can we do a survey monkey to the teachers on it?
We could. On the on which things?
K through 2 awards.
Okay.
And maybe if they get enough feedback from their teachers when you do your meeting, maybe those designated people can get feedback through a survey or some kind of thing that they discuss with you regarding the calendar.
With the contract, for the superintendent contract, when do we have to begin the review and discussion on that?
Okay, by law, you have to let me know by April 15th if I will be renewed. But anytime between now and then, we can talk about renewal, extension, any of those kinds of things. So we're within we couldn't have before, my understanding is we could not have had that discussion before January 1st, but you have to clear up until April 15th to tell me to show me the door, or
Are we able to have an executive session to discuss?
Yes.
Before we actually go into
Yes.
that? So we
Yes.
definitely want to have that as a future topic.
I have superintendent's contracts, so do you want a separate?
A separate to discuss, you know, kind of
Okay.
where we've been, overview.
Okay. So like a continuation of my eval?
Yes.
Kind of, sort of?
Mhm.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. Item 6.2, upcoming board events.
Interestingly enough, there are not a whole lot of ASBA things coming up. There is the Bolts thing, if anybody's interested in going to that. I think Kim sent out that information a while back, if somebody's interested in going to it. They've done their big, workshops and those things for the year. But you might start thinking about next year, so you can start planning your calendars and that kind of thing. And then just a reminder that there are always, ASBA has all kinds of online little webinars and little training things that you can do at your own leisure, and I would encourage you to take advantage of those.
All right. No other upcoming events. Item 6.3, date, time, and location for future meetings. We have requested on here February 20th, 2019 at 5 o'clock. Is that for a workshop or is that for a meeting?
I think you guys can decide the time. The 20th is a Thursday, your typical meeting day, but you can decide the time.
Wrestling season's over, so I'm good.
5:30 always works better for me.
Me too.
So we change that to 5:30? Is that date good for everyone?
Yes.
2020 also.
Oh, yes, 2020.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, we're all having trouble writing 2020. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so February 20th, 2020. That's a lot of 20s.
It's a lot of twos.
At 5:30 p.m. Works for everyone. Doug, are you good with that date?
Yes.
And
All right.
5:30 is the workshop?
Yes.
How long of a workshop do you want?
What
what's our workshop?
What do we have
Well,
on there?
you need to decide which things you want on that workshop. So if you want feedback on Flex Fridays, and that kind of thing, and that would, probably you could do that, and if we're ready from our discussions on the awards assemblies and those kinds of things, that probably, those two things together might only be 30 minutes. But if you want anything else, the performance pay thing and whatever, it's probably an hour.
All right, so I'd say, you want to do those two first?
Let's do 2.
Yeah, let's do the
30
two, so
minutes.
30 minute.
Okay,
And then that would give us a 6 o'clock meeting time. All right,
excellent.
anything else?
Do we need to add the IJ to the next meeting agenda to find out the status of where we're at?
Right, we'll put it on
Okay,
old
you're right.
business, so
Good,
you've got
thank you.
No other items. Item 7.1, we do not have executive session.
Yay.
So now all we have is a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Randy Dubois. Jeannie Borland.
Diane Beardsley.
Corey Burgess.
Doug Lutz.
We are adjourned. So are these all done?
No, they're,
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 So are these all done?
no, they're.